Good morning, PD. You're listening to Live and Local Mornings for Florence and the PD on Live 95.
Welcome back to Good Morning PD Live 95. Today's show brought to you by Blue Line Shooting Center. They invite you to participate in their once-a-month shooting competition on their tactical shooting range where you can compete, test your skills with other members and folks in the area for the bragging rights should you win. For more information, go to BlueLineShootingCenter.com. They're Florence's only indoor shooting facility with a retail gun and apparel store. Come in today, see their large selection of guns, knives, accessories in a new 2,400 square foot showroom. Takes Mondays to make Fridays. Call today. You want a free T-shirt courtesy of Pepsi Cola. I'll conclude my lecture and tutorial on monopoly power and the workings of the economy.
You're kind of an economics professor this morning.
Well, that's hard to believe. And then once again, as Clint Eastwood said, a man has to know his limitations. I don't know how to fix it. I just think it's something that has happened to this economy. And I've always been kind of an instinctive, gut-driven sort of guy. Something tells me that all of this has worked to the worker's disadvantage, and the investor and the higher income group in America have benefited a lot from the consolidating. I mean, if you're an investor in a couple of businesses that are in the home improvement part of the economy, and there were 12 or 13 or 14 places to go and buy home improvement product, now there's only a couple, then the obvious assumption is to believe the bottom line of those companies will do much better. And once again, Rev, I think as business people, you're always accounting for the bottom line. I think it's easier to account for a bottom line when you don't live in the community of which you operate that business in. And I think when you go to the pharmacy bill of 1963 in North Dakota, the pharmacists live in their state. They live in that community. The majority of us, and I'll go on the record, I don't care who we make mad. I mean, the majority of us who buy our prescriptions today are more than likely going to buy those prescriptions from somewhere who have no interest whatsoever in Florence County. I mean, they'll give you your drugs. They'll charge you a fair price. They'll process your insurance. The profit and proceeds will go somewhere other than here. And at the end of the day, these companies have very little interest in the plight of your community. I'm not saying don't do that, but I think there's a reality involved in that. And I think public companies, it has to be all about the bottom line. I think in private companies, there is an obligation. There is a level, I hesitate to say altruism, because you're always profit motivated, but I do believe there's an accounting for the plight of your worker. You know, how do I treat my employee? I'm not saying big companies don't treat their employees well. I'm not arguing that. But if you have kind of sort of a monopoly in a certain sector of business, you don't have to pay your employees as much as you would if there were great competition for valuable employees amongst 10 or 12 enterprises. You got one or two places to go and work. You probably don't have to pay as much there. Once again, this is not me as an economist. My economy degree came from Trading Places when Eddie Murphy said, you know, the mom's hesitant because she can't buy G.I. Joe with a Kung Fu grip. I mean, that's kind of the way I analyze and understand the economy. But I will say this in closing, and then we'll go talk about the investigation. I will say this. There's a website. There's several websites you can go on and see how much money some of these companies have contributed to political campaigns. Rev, it would blow your mind to see how many of these companies have given money to Ted Cruz and Nancy Pelosi. I mean, just think of that. I mean, they give max contributions to Ted Cruz. They give max contributions to Nancy Pelosi. Why? Because they're trying to push the ball down the field. They have no interest in school prayer. They have no interest in the Ten Commandments. They have no interest whatsoever in Trump being the president or not. They're all about getting their deal done. And if you believe their deal is not about the bottom line, then you're more naive than you could ever imagine. I mean, think of a company that gives Ted Cruz money. And you say, well, wow, that company must be run by some conservative person. Well, let me flip the page, and they gave Nancy Pelosi just as much money. Okay, it's about bouncing the ball and advancing it down the field. I do want to close this segment by making sure we touch on the investigation. First of all, let's go over some polling, because I think that's important to see what the public thinks about where we are in regards. Now, there's a slew of polls that were conducted in April. We're getting a lot of some of the results as we speak. The support for special counsel Bob Mueller's probe into the, I guess we'll call it the Russian interference into the 2016 presidential election is shrinking. Jim Comey went from 6'8" to 5'10". I have no idea how tall Bob Mueller is, but recent polls from Monmouth, Quinnipiac, and Marist indicate Americans are souring on the wide-ranging poll. Monmouth's May 1st survey finds 54% of Americans believe the special counsel's pursuit should continue. That's over half of America. But it's down from 60% in March and 62% in February. Nearly 43% think the investigation should end. That's up 10% from January and February. Support, and this is the most important part of the poll, support among independents for continuing for Russian investigation has declined from 63% in March to 54% in the new poll. It's unbelievable to me that someone would profess to be a media enterprise and not report that. That's unbelievable that there is a sentiment in America, a mood shift in America, that fewer and fewer people are trusting the work Bob Mueller is doing, and nobody's reporting on it. I mean, they'll tell you we got polls crammed down our throats when Trump's approvals were 31 or 2 or 3%. That's all we heard every single day. There was a drumbeat, a nonstop drumbeat of how unpopular this president was. Now his popularity is 44.4%. And I did hear Matthew Dowd on George Stephanopoulos yesterday basically frustrated with the American public. Apparently we just got these idiots in America who can't, for whatever reason, put their brains behind and understand that the only reason Trump's elected is Vladimir Putin flipped him a 20 spot and convinced him in Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin to vote for Trump. I mean, that's the arrogance of which his delivery is. That's not the case. Donald Trump, in the midst of an FBI investigation led by special counsel Bob Mueller, I mean, think of this. And there's a little beauty in the electorate. I mean, the American people may finally be waking up and realize the con that has been perpetrated against them for the past 40 years. The American public, in the middle of an FBI special counsel investigation, approve of Donald Trump's job, the job he's doing now, more than they did when the investigation began. To me, that speaks to the lack of credibility with the investigation, the overreach of the investigation, and the style Donald Trump has employed in aggressively going after Bob Mueller. I said earlier this morning, I think Rudy Giuliani has been net negative. I think Giuliani made a big mistake in saying, I'm not up to speed yet on all the goings on. Well, if you're not up to speed, don't go on television. Now Rudy's an accomplished pundit. He's a brilliant lawyer and prosecutor. He's a politico. He's the guy. He's the right guy for the job. But you shouldn't have to have him out there until he was up to speed on exactly what the consistent commentary would be from the Trump campaign. That was a big mistake, and now Rudy's kind of scrambling, and I think Trump said, he'll figure it out. Rudy's smart. Rudy will figure it out, and he'll have his facts straight sooner than later. But think about this.
Truthfully and honestly, that was kind of an amateur move.
It was a very amateur move, and it's hard to get away with that. Now, Rudy's a competent guy, and I still believe he's the right guy if they're going scorched earth on the Mueller investigation. But it's embarrassing to the Trump side of this debate when your lead lawyer says, I'm not up to speed yet, but I'm sitting in this chair trying to answer all the questions. Don't put him under the spotlight until he's prepared and equipped to say exactly what needs to be said from the other side. That's criticism I'll level against the Trump campaign and Giuliani for allowing himself. He's too old a hand at this. He knows better than to go out there. Now, he's going to be aggressive. He's going to be a pit bull He will eventually come up to speed, I would imagine. But I just think that was a tactical mistake to have him out there as a spokesperson. But the public is shifting on this. I mean, the public sentiment is in mood shift right now, and nobody's talking about it. Fewer people trust that Bob Mueller is genuinely interested in anything but a witch hunt. I mean, the American public are beginning to say, wow. And I think the rebuking by the judge on Friday, something happened again over the weekend. They're having a bad go of it right now. And once again, the only place that will talk about this dynamic is talk radio and maybe a little bit of Fox News. I would imagine Rush and Sean and Glenn Beck and all. Well, Beck's a little different. He'll cry and talk about making the world a better place. And somewhere in between all that, he'll talk about Trump. But I would imagine, Limbaugh and Hannity will, and they have these massive audiences, that they will talk about some of these same things. But there's something happening in America today. The numbers are what the numbers are. 44%, actually 44.4 is the RCP average of Donald Trump's approval ratings. That is a big number now. A president in the middle of an investigation has gone from 31 or 2 or 3 to 44%. And Bob Mueller's, we'll call it his approval ratings, are in decline. And that's not one poll. That's 3 polls conducted in the month of April. Fewer people believe that Mueller's trying to get to the bottom of something. More people believe he's after Trump.